This is a relay project.
Real Talk starts right now. Here's Ryan Jesperson.
Grateful to have you here with us on this episode of Real Talk. New poll shows that conservatives, in particular in Canada, increasingly concerned about how democracy is working. Meantime, Alberta Premier Danielle Smith and Prime Minister Mark Carney preparing for an announcement just over 48 hours from when we're doing this show. It's going to be at a Calgary Chamber of Commerce event down in Canada's energy capital, down in the home of the Major Projects Office. It's expected that it will be a memorandum of understanding that will move Alberta's UCP closer to that pipeline that they've been asking for, even demanding from Ottawa for the past while. But here's the thing. BC's Premier David Eby says that his province doesn't want it. He says he's not been invited to the bargaining table, nor have coastal First Nations. He says to expect pushback. Alberta's also investigating new methods of delivering health care that could be a public-private hybrid system that would include family doctors. Details expected on that. We're going to get to all of these stories and more with two of Alberta's most prominent political commentators, Dr. Duane Bratt out of Mount Royal University, Janet Brown from Janet Brown Opinion Research, both joining us right here in our Real Talk studio in the historic Mercer Warehouse in downtown Edmonton. That in just a moment. But if you're watching us on YouTube, and if you can see this on our live stream presented by California Closets, you can see this bottle that I've got on the table. This is Hansen Distillery's Mint Chocolate Cream Liqueur. This is part of their holiday lineup. You can read more about it at hansendistillery.com, or you can find it at their beautiful distillery location in West Edmonton, just off 111th Avenue, 174th Street, right by Mercedes-Benz Edmonton West. Winter tastes better with a little rebellion, and that's why Hansen is bringing the heat this holiday season with two limited edition seasonal releases. The gingerbread cookie cream liqueur, like Grandma's cookie jar, if Grandma spiked it. And this, the mint chocolate cream liqueur, my personal favorite, smooth, cool, and pure holiday indulgence. Think peppermint patty, but maybe with horsepower. And of course, for those whiskey lovers out there, the legend returns. The Northern Eyes 5-year whiskey is back at Hansen. Bold, oaky, prairie-born, and aged to perfection. Last year it sold out. It's going to sell out again this year, and fast. So whether you're sipping something sweet, shaking up your festive cocktails, or maybe gifting a bottle that's actually going to get remembered, Hansen Distillery has your winter spirits covered. Proudly local, always original, made right here. Learn more at hansendistillery.com. As we officially welcome pollster and political commentator Janet Brown and political scientist Dr. Duane Bratt to the Real Talk studio in our feature interview presented by Mercedes-Benz Edmonton West. Lucky enough to have the both of you up in Alberta's capital city and kind enough to wake up early to join us in studio. Thanks for doing so.
Thanks so much for having us.
It's nice to have you two together, a dynamic duo. I heard rumblings. I'm betraying the confidence yesterday of a TIA gathering. That's the Tourism Industry Association, where both of you were pundits on a panel that I was lucky enough to moderate. You divulged a secret to me, and I wonder if I can spill the beans on this. Do you know the one I'm talking about? The secret that maybe the two of you have mused about?
Yes. The secret podcast.
The secret, yeah. Well, Duane and I, we do talk a lot offline, right? And we're old enough that we don't text each other. We just call, right?
Yes.
And so Duane just calls me, and our calls always start with, "Hey, Duane, hey, Janet," and then we spill the tea. And so we've always joked that we should have a podcast called Hey, Duane, Hey, Janet. But both of us have been sued or threatened to sue at different times, so we've decided maybe the podcast isn't the best.
So we'll go on someone else's podcast, so if they get sued,
exactly.
we're okay.
Yeah.
Well, we've told you, and we always let the audience know that a portion of our proceeds, and then we have kind support in our Real Talk Super Chat. This is our live chat, of course, that you'll see on YouTube, and we'll be referencing this today, powered by Park Power. Real Talkers are kind enough to support us there, and we put a good, healthy portion of that toward a premium every year that covers us, that ensures
have a business model that we would have to replicate if we ever did a podcast.
In such situations. But I would invite the two of you to speak freely, but I already know that you will. I'm not too worried about it. I wanted to hit this story head on. We'll talk about the pipeline news in just a moment. This is obviously a story that everybody's talking about across Canada, including BC, including in Quebec, obviously in Ontario. But we'll lead with these poll results out this week. The research by Environics, and Janet obviously is, probably Alberta's most prominent pollster yourself. We'll get you to comment on that. But it shows that Conservatives, as reported by Ian Bailey in Ottawa at theglobeandmail.com, Conservatives are increasingly concerned about Canadian democracy, and the numbers are striking. This was part of an international series on polling, found that generally speaking, about 70% of Canadians were satisfied or very satisfied with the way that democracy works in Canada. Satisfaction obviously highest among Liberal Party supporters, their guys in office at 89%. Conservatives, for the first time since this survey began in 2010, almost equally divided between those who were satisfied and those who were dissatisfied. 52% of Conservative supporters are satisfied or very satisfied with Canadian democracy. Janet, that's down from 89% in 2014, when, of course, Stephen Harper was still in power. NDP supporters, for what it's worth, about on the poll average, 71% say that they're happy or very happy with the state of democracy or how it's working in Canada. Do we write off some of these results based on obvious factors? If your party has formed government, minority or otherwise, you're more satisfied than if they haven't?
Well, if I'm a good pollster, it's because I earned my stripes at Environics. That was where I worked for many years before I went out on my own. So I'm not going to poo-poo an Environics poll. I know it's a great pollster, and I know there's great quality polling. And I would say, no, these results do not surprise me. Because you can just feel it with Conservative voters right now. They're getting more and more frustrated. We've gone through election cycles where the Conservatives get more votes but lose the election because they don't get as many seats. If you look over the last 10, 15 years, Conservatives are sometimes in power, but the Liberals are more likely to be in power. So I'm not surprised that Conservative voters feel that over and over again they tend to be at this historic disadvantage, that, they go to a party and they're like, everybody here thinks like me, but election day rolls around and they feel like they get outnumbered.
What do you think about it, Duane?
It does not surprise me. It's a growing trend globally that we have seen. David Frum, the prominent political columnist, Canadian-American, has always said that if it's a choice between conservatism and democracy, Conservatives will take conservatism over democracy. But it's more than just partisanship. There's a belief that even when Conservatives are in power, they're constrained by these special interest groups, which are basically any group that you don't like, they say control democracy. So democracy is fine if it's people like me, but once you start including people that aren't like me, whether that's sexual minorities, in some cases women, in some cases progressives, then that's not really democracy. And there's always been an element of that, but it is a growing element, and it's a very worrisome element.
Yeah, I want to get into why it's worrisome, and I want to throw one other result from this poll into the mix because I think it's also interesting. The survey found that, 52% or just over half of Conservative supporters say that they are satisfied or very satisfied with democracy. Not exactly a ringing endorsement, but it did find that 7 out of 10 Conservative supporters, 70%, continue to believe democracy is preferable to any other form of government. And as a subheading, that's similar to responses from Liberal and NDP supporters. That's the one that kind of threw me for a loop, that only 7 out of 10 Canadians feel that democracy is preferable to any other form of government.
Well, and that's the old adage. Democracy is the worst form of government, except compared to every other form of government. Yeah. So it may seem like a contradiction, but the frustration is that we talk about electoral reform and all sorts of things, but the frustration is that that people don't see a better alternative out there for them.
Or they conflate with cost of living and other challenges that they're facing and say, well, the problem is democracy. If only we had an enlightened dictator. And unfortunately, those don't occur. Pericles has been dead for 2,500 years. There aren't that many enlightened dictators. And so I think that's where it comes from. But it's also a false sense that there's some sort of idealized past where everything was so much better, that affordability was so much better in the 1970s or the 1960s because they're looking back in rose-colored glasses.
I wish Environics had sort of probed into what people think democracy means, right? It seems like a pretty straightforward question, but I wonder if in 2010, when the question was first asked, I wonder what people thought the word democracy meant. I wonder what they think it means now. Because I think years ago, democracy, and Duane, you're the political scientist, democracy was a more nuanced term. Yep. Now I think the conservatives think democracy means majority rule. And that's not what it means at all. And that's not what I learned in political science. So I wonder to the extent that people that conservatives are thinking about democracy in a different way than they did years ago.
It's not just elections, right? We make a distinction between electoral democracy and procedural democracy. And procedural democracy includes all sorts of personal freedoms: freedom of expression, freedom of speech, freedom of the press, minority rights, competitive parties. All of that is part of what democracy is. It's not just winner take all.
Mark's in our live chat powered by Park Power. He says the thing about imperfect democracy is that each person within it is obliged to work to improve it. Kind of puts the onus on people participating in the process. There needs to be a commitment to democracy within a citizenry for democracy to survive, doesn't it? I'm not saying that it's well, actually, let me put it to you in the form of a question. What about our American neighbors?
Let me throw another political science term out here, and it's called loser's consent, right? And it's the idea that you fight an election, you fight it hard, you lose, but you accept the result because you're going to fight again. If you only accept the results of when you win, then you don't really have a democracy. If you talk about, well, the media cheated, or the other party cheated, or the voters got it wrong, then you're in trouble. I think, sadly, that's where the United States is now. There's other, what we call illiberal democracies, where parties come to power through the ballot box. Think of Viktor Orban in Hungary. Think of the Polish Justice Party. And once they're there, they start to dismantle every guardrail possible, and they centralize as much power in one institution because that's the institution that they want.
And simultaneously, as people are getting frustrated with democracy, we're seeing voter turnout drop, right? Like, just think of these last municipal elections. Edmonton was even worse than Calgary, and they were both pretty anemic.
Edmonton was like 30%.
Lethbridge was in the teens.
Teens, yeah. So, and we're talking about lower voter turnout in some of the more conservative pockets of the province. So democracy is in crisis, but maybe people are concerned about different aspects of democracy.
Interesting point from Les in our live chat. Says former Manitoba Liberal leader Sharon Carstner said a real democracy is when the majority looks after the rights of the minority. Interesting take on that. I think it's worth putting into the mix. Comment here from Andrew Parkin, executive director of Environics, the Environics Institute, said, talking about conservatives and maybe that sort of evolution in how they're feeling after 4 consecutive election defeats. Says conservatives, yes, are less satisfied with the way the political system's unfolding for them, but that doesn't mean that they're necessarily less committed to a democratic way of life. Parkin said, I think that's really important to draw that distinction. The research also did find that fewer Canadians are confident that votes are always counted fairly in the country, or that foreign governments never influence Canadian election results. So I'll throw some numbers out here for you as well. With apologies to our podcast listeners, if you're like me, a sea of numbers banging around between your ears is tough to process. But the question was, election results should be respected regardless of which candidate or party wins. To what extent do you agree or disagree with this statement? 44% of Canadians polled strongly agree with the statement that election results should be respected regardless of which candidate or party wins. 56% of Liberals strongly agreed. 35% of Conservatives strongly agreed. And then the NDP and the Bloc Québécois right around that 45% mark. Those that strongly disagreed, the numbers are negligible. But do you read into anything there, Janet? By the way, can I just say, as a spectator in person, watching you look at graphs and poll results, I feel like I'm just, it's like the beautiful mind thing happening here in front of us.
Well, and I'm looking at the color, I'm looking at the layout, right? But
yes.
But okay, the thing that struck me was you said there's very low people who strongly disagree with that. There's very few people who somewhat disagreed. disagree is negligible. So that's positive, right? When you talked about who agree, so the categories were strongly agree, some would agree, and then neither. So the neither people are concerning, but let's take a victory lap in that very few people disagree with this. So Duane's ideas of of consent is still maintained.
Is holding up in
is
this
holding
country.
up. Yes.
Yeah, I'm just getting into it. Folks are starting to share like their own voter conviction or even their voting track record. Super Chat Ken says that he voted for his local Conservative MP, Chief Billy Morin, says because I felt that he was the best candidate, but says Ken, I completely understand why so many moved away from Pierre Poilievre. This could be a question about leader, candidate.
That's a great point, too. I mean, our voting in Canada is complicated under the parliamentary democracy system. You have to think about the local candidate and what you feel about them. You have to think about the leader. You have to think about the party. I equate it to going to Vegas and only being able to play one chip the whole time you're there.
I've been in that position,
yeah,
Janet.
and so it does frustrate voters that they may have one feeling about a candidate, one other feeling about a leader, another feeling about a party, or the line we hear in Alberta all the time is, I hear this in focus groups, people say, well, I'm fiscally conservative, but I'm socially progressive.
Yeah.
And even voters in their own minds can have cognitive dissonance because they're sort of asked to choose between a bunch of complex options and then choose the one vote that they think best captures even their own, complicated views on things.
Well, we had these conversations after the floor crossing of Chris D'Autremont and the very bizarre resignation of Matt Genereux. Because people go, well, I voted for the party, which they do. We know, we've got lots of political science research on this. Anywhere between 3 and 5% of voters base it on the candidate. It's either the party or the party leader. And so you can understand, I didn't vote for you, I voted for the Conservative. Well, then why do we put individuals on the ballot, right? And there are independents that win. I think of Jody Wilson-Raybould, won as an independent, but she had established a track record prior. So a floor crossing to my party, that's democracy. A floor crossing from my party, that's anti-democratic.
What do you feel is so bizarre, your word, about Matt Genereux's resignation?
Because he puts out multiple statements. There had been rumors that he was part of floor crossing. Then he puts out a statement, says, I need to spend more time with my family. I'm disappointed we didn't win the election. There's no timeline, but he does say, I wish to speak with my parliamentary colleagues one more time. That sounds pretty imminent to me. Then Pierre Poilievre puts out a statement saying, oh no, he's leaving in April. Then Matt Genereux later that night says, oh yeah, I meant April. And then we had a budget vote where he's abstaining, not because he's there, but because he's not even in Ottawa. And so what I'm hearing is that he was bullied by elements of the Conservative Party not to cross the floor and to be quiet about his resignation. And that's not good for party democracy. And if I'm a Conservative MP, anywhere else, I'm wondering, is this going to happen to me? So, when you get a chance to have Mr. Genereux on Real Talk, ask him about these timelines.
Well, I sure will. I mean, we reached out to him. I would say to his credit, he got back to us. Yeah. And but it's kind of the boilerplate response, and I'm not faulting him for that. I understand that there's a lot of factors at play. He said he appreciates us reaching out. Yeah. He's appreciated what the show brings to discourse in Alberta, and it was sort of a "don't call me, I'll call you" type response, where we expect an interview at some point. But I'm
so if he is resigning in April, is he basically quiet quitting between now and then? Like, is he?
Well, he abstained from the budget vote
and not went to Ottawa, right? Is he in the constituency office? Is he responding to correspondence? Like, these are all does Edmonton Riverbend have a MP right now?
Yeah, the whole idea around.
So that's why I think the word bizarre.
They're in limbo.
Is pretty good. Limbo.
Yeah, they're in limbo for sure. I want to talk pipelines with you and what this looks like, both interprovincial relationships. Scott Moe has entered the chat from Saskatchewan, says that to a certain degree he's been at the table or he's participated in talks. I'll be careful how I frame that. Meantime, David Eby, his colleague, the Premier of BC, says he's been nowhere near those talks and he demands to be part of it. We'll hear from more from Dr. Duane Bratt, Janet Brown, our guests in studio in our feature interview presented by Mercedes-Benz Edmonton West, and we'll get to what you have to say in our live chat powered by Park Power through this conversation. First, I want to make sure that Park Power is on your radar at parkpower.ca, your friendly local utilities provider with electricity, natural gas, and internet, including bundled rates exclusively for Real Talkers. If you go to parkpower.ca/Real Talk, find out how you can save up to $150 off your first bill from Park Power. $150 off your first bill. That's parkpower.ca/Real Talk. Low rates, awesome service, and profits shared with Alberta charities. I want to put this in plain language, friends. If you're looking at any other option from your typical, let's say, internet provider, and you're going, I'm pretty sure my internet provider's faster than everybody else, not true. Park Power's just as fast, if not faster, than anybody else. It's just less expensive. Again, check out parkpower.ca/Real Talk to save today. We're so proud to be supporting UCAN Youth Services as our charity of choice this year. This is a remarkable nonprofit charitable organization helping young people out of harm's way and onto a path of economic independence. A big part of that is their Ready to Work programs, Verto and the Road to Work. Young people getting ready to enter the workforce, and for the young talent entering this workforce, motivated, ready to go, it's little things that are going to make the biggest difference, including the gift of confidence. That could be a bus pass, warm socks, even a coffee card. This Christmas, fill a stocking that'll remove barriers and build confidence for Edmonton youth starting their first jobs by visiting UCAN.ca. If you're motivated to go green this spring, cut down on your energy costs. It starts with a visit to Kuby.ca. That's KUBY.ca, where you'll find solar by Kuby, creating sustainable energy systems, big, huge installations like this one at the Edmonton Convention Center. We're showing you that. That's got to be the cleanest solar panel install I've ever seen. Of course, they do commercial, industrial, agricultural, residential installations as well. 6,000 residential installations. Kuby, the busiest in Western Canada, and the quote's always free. You can visit them online today at kuby.ca. It was that exact location, a matter of fact, the Edmonton Convention Center, where I was spending some time with these two, Janet Brown, Dr. Duane Bratt, it's called the TIA Forum. This is a tourism forum where we talked about the economy and a million different things. Premier Danielle Smith speaking at the dinner last night. I had an opportunity to speak with, I will say, a source within the Smith office who confirmed the worst kept secret in Canada right now, which is that on Thursday of this week, the Premier and the Prime Minister will introduce what's believed to be a memorandum of understanding around a new pipeline. I saw here in our live chat, Greg checked in and he said, well, it's a maybe MOU. It's a maybe memorandum of understanding, which is blowing Dr. Bratt back in his chair. What prompted that reply,
well,
that
it's
response?
Not a maybe. I mean, you can criticize that a memorandum of understanding is meaningless and it's not a permit and it's not construction, but it's not a maybe. I mean, they're actually going to have a signing ceremony. We know the bare bones of it. I'm very interested in the details of it. And apparently, Janet's going. They're having a big luncheon at the Calgary Chamber.
We were all our phones are going off. The Calgary Chamber announced there's going to be a Carney lunch on Thursday, so we were all scrambling to get tickets to the big event.
Yeah.
So what are we details wise? Because there's
so it's a grand bargain, and so basically what I think you're going to see is approval for a pipeline in principle, even though there's no proponent, no route, but approval of the pipeline in principle in exchange for efforts at emissions reductions, whether that is carbon capture and storage, which the Pathways Alliance has been talking about, as well as a possible increase in the federal provincial industrial carbon tax. So there'll be laws that are changed. So we often hear, well, no proponent's going to go forward with a tanker ban. No proponent's going to go forward with the Impact Assessment Act. But under Bill C-5, if it's determined in the national project interest, it can bypass those two. And so you may recall during the election campaign, Danielle Smith had those 9 bad laws. Well, I think what you're going to see is the removal of some of those laws, support for a pipeline, but also an increase in others like the industrial carbon tax. And I think you would have to describe this as a big win for the Premier, without a doubt. This has been the number one item on her agenda. She has been pursuing this since she was elected in 2022. Previous Alberta premiers, Jason Kenney, for that matter, Rachel Notley, have pursued similar strategies without success. And it appears that she is going to get something big, which is why at the event yesterday, she could not have said more nice things about Mark Carney. They are besties. And she kept referencing, oh yes, my good friend Mark Carney is going to do this, and I'm happy Mark Carney's doing that. Do you remember her comments about Justin Trudeau? Not quite the same.
Not quite the same. A little bit different.
Yeah.
What are you going to be keeping a keen eye on when it comes to the details around this, Janet, or what are you paying closest attention to?
I'm going to let Duane worry about the details, and I'm going to try and take a step back, and I'm going to try and imagine how it's going to land with the average Albertan. And the average Albertan and some important subsets of Albertans. So Danielle Smith has got a few different audiences she's got to worry about, right? One of the audiences is her base. And this weekend she has the UCP convention. And the base is going to gather, and the base is going to give her input immediately as to whether they like this deal or not. And then you extend the base to maybe people who wouldn't show up at a UCP convention but voted for her the last time. How do they feel about it? How do swing voters feel about it? So as a pollster, I'm going to be looking for how it lands. And it is a big victory for the Premier. But, sometimes in life and sometimes in communications, you don't want a deal to look too easy. A year ago, none of us thought something like this would have been possible. And if tomorrow it just kind of looks like it was she might not get the credit that
I don't think it was easy. I don't think she thinks it was easy. I don't think Mark Carney. They kept talking about, it'll be in the first tranche of the major projects. Now it'll be in the second. Now it'll be before Grey Cup. Well, I think the key deadline was the UCP convention. She can walk in holding this piece. I was about to say peace in our time, but that's a bad historical reference.
I think there were two deadlines.
Yeah.
One of them was the federal budget. I don't think Mark Carney could afford to do this before the budget because it might have sparked some discontent within his own caucus, and it might have made it harder for him to pass the budget, might have made it harder for him to get Elizabeth May on side, things like that. So we had to get past the budget. Then there was this trip to South Africa for the G20, and now we've got so it's like he has to get back from South Africa. He has to sign it before the UCP convention. Bingo, it's Thursday.
And both Premier Smith and Prime Minister Carney were in the United Arab Emirates for very different reasons, so that shows some synergy as well. I know you're going to mention David Eby's going to be upset, but this has always been thus. So there were fights between John Horgan and Rachel Notley, John Horgan and Jason Kenney, Christy Clark and Alison Redford. Yeah. There's always going to be these things. And what I find more interesting is Eby is now talking about, this great Trans Mountain pipeline, how about we just expand that? Well, it wasn't that long ago that the BC government hated the Trans Mountain pipeline. We're going to use every tool in the toolbox. So I think his opposition is not as important. Now, the coastal Indigenous people, that's a different story.
Sure.
And there are constitutional mechanisms. There has to be a duty to consult under Section 35. The government did not do Section 35 consultation very well on the first Trans Mountain, which is why it got delayed. It stymied the Northern Gateway, and so they're going to have to do this very carefully to get them on side. Now, consultation does not mean veto, but you have to do it seriously. You can't just walk in and go, Ryan, what are your concerns? And I write them down, and then I completely ignore them, right? There has to be a good faith consultation, and that's going to be a challenge.
So it's not surprising that Eby doesn't like the Northern Pipeline. What was surprising is his acquiescence on expanding Trans Mountain. That's sort of the surprise here. And that says to me that Eby sees that public opinion on pipelines and economic development and being an energy superpower, David Eby must be feeling a shift in that. Not enough of a shift that he wants to be the person who's advocating for a northern pipeline, but enough of a shift that he doesn't want to be seen as the person who is holding back further development of Trans Mountain.
And what explains that shift? So we had a speech from the throne by the Alberta government when they opened the legislative session up. When you read through that, the Premier is taking a victory lap, saying, because of her actions, she has personally changed public opinion towards a pipeline, that every province, including BC, now supports a pipeline. All of that is true, but it wasn't due to the efforts of Smith. Kenny said the same message. Notley said the same message. Prentice said the same message. It is due to another person, and that's Donald Trump. Right? The challenge of tariffs, the challenge that Trump is presenting, has created a nationalistic view that, oh my God, we have to start selling petroleum to Asia instead of the United States. And the only way to do that is with a pipeline. And so has Smith's diplomatic work, has she been involved in that? Absolutely. Does she deserve credit? Absolutely. Mark Carney deserves credit for this, but I think a lot of that credit, ironically, goes to Donald Trump.
Well, we will put David Eby on the record here and just get to what BC's Premier has said about this. But I want to circle back on the two of you both talking about timing and getting that federal budget passed. We talked to Elizabeth May on the 20th of November. I encourage people to check out that interview. She was remarkably candid. Great interview, as a matter of fact. But I asked her about this, and I said, listen, the consumer carbon tax has evaporated, and you've got what appears to be plans for a pipeline to BC's northwest coast. And, I didn't phrase it this way, but were you misled? Were you double-crossed? Would you take your vote back if you could? She tells us on the show, she says, I've been around long enough to see trial balloons floated. This is one of them. Let's shoot it down. It's not happening. Elizabeth May in an interesting position, having supported the budget when this is really, not technically, but essentially the first big announcement following budget.
Mm-hmm.
The budget would have passed even if Elizabeth May had voted no on it. Another NDPer would have abstained, or a Conservative would have abstained.
Hang on, let me because we don't hear this a lot, but you're implying, and a lot of people are implying that like everybody was in on this.
Oh, absolutely. All you had to do was look at the TV when the vote happened.
When's the last time you've seen that?
Everybody was in on it except for the Bloc.
Except for the Bloc. Yeah. The picture of Andrew Scheer and Scott Reid, another Conservative MP, hiding behind the curtain, to see what the NDP was doing. So they abstained first, and then they rushed in to change their vote because neither the NDP nor the Conservatives wanted to support the budget, but they didn't want the government to fall.
I still maintain it would have been tricky for Carney to sign this memo of understanding before the budget, not because of what the NDP or the Conservatives would have done, but just to avoid any sort of dissension within his own caucus.
Well, and Carney is going to the industry and going, you guys said you can increase production and reduce emissions simultaneously. Mm-hmm. Let's see you do it. Mm-hmm. We're going to increase the industrial carbon tax. That's going to force you to do that. We're going to take efforts on carbon sequestration, make you do that. And in exchange, we're going to build a pipeline. Right. Or provide an opportunity to build a pipeline.
Mm-hmm. Let's get to what BC's Premier had to say about this. David Eby's, he's not thrilled. Said he had not been aware of the talks with Alberta.
Oh, come on.
he says that and this is the two of them had a discussion, just the day before today. We never know when people are going to listen to these podcasts, but we're talking to you the day after these comments were made by David Eby. Said BC's Premier, quote, Mark Carney has outlined to me that the agreement with Alberta is not finalized, and I took the opportunity to outline BC's perspective. Said that First Nations must have a say in a pipeline that goes through traditional territory. The current tanker ban should not be lifted. It would have to be. And that any multi-billion-dollar federal subsidy to an Alberta pipeline must be matched with a similar subsidy for a BC project. Sounds like Calgary and Edmonton fighting. He said that there's little likelihood that any private sector company would be willing to invest in an oil pipeline specifically to the West Coast. Realtek has heard from investment and industry experts that disagree with that. He says there's not a world in with the current price of oil, a private company is going to step up and pay for this pipeline, which would be estimated at a price tag of $20 to $30 billion. Said BC's Premier, it's an incredibly precarious shipping route. It's the reason why the ban on oil tankers exists. And here's what I wanted to talk to the two of you about. Says the Premier of BC, a heavy oil spill would decimate a $1.7 billion industry of fisheries and tourism and way of life in the Northwest. there's a risk,
Absolutely.
right? And there's a trade-off, and not everybody's going to be happy in a situation like this. I feel like I should knock on wood as I say it, but the hypothetical, if there were to be a heavy oil spill, they talk about the storms and the conditions in this route. I don't know anything about piloting these big shipping vessels, but an oil spill, heaven forbid, after a tanker ban was lifted, would end a prime minister's career, wouldn't it? I mean, honestly, with public opinion, the oil-soaked ducks and the humpback whales caked in oil.
Think of the Exxon Valdez.
Right.
But that was also in the 1980s. There has been a lot of changes made. And Mark Carney's going, by the time if it's ever constructed and operational, I'm going to be long retired.
You don't think that's a very cynical
no,
way
but it is a realistic, and EB is looking at the Trans Mountain Pipeline, which had a whole series of problems, not the least of which was having it delayed because of the consultations, because of the problems of COVID, because of the fires in British Columbia. There were a lot of things. So to say we're going to look at the most expensive pipeline ever built, and this one will be even more so. So no, he's using every stick in his fight, like Adrian Dix, like John Horgan, like Christy Clark. That's what I would expect him to do. But the fact that he's saying I was unaware of these discussions, come on. Now, he could have said, I was unaware that Scott Moe was participating in that, because that was news to me, that somehow this Alberta, Canada MOU has some input from Saskatchewan. And so if you're going to talk to Saskatchewan, you should probably talk to BC.
I'm Googling here, polls BC support for new pipeline, Janet, and because I know that there was a poll that we cited on the show last week. It's an Angus Reid poll, October 2025, that found that a majority of British Columbians, 56%, support a new pipeline to the West Coast, while 34% oppose it. People can check out angusreid.org. I don't mean to, by the way, to be mentioning all of your competitors, but we're going to drive people to your website.
Today you're mentioning all of my former employers.
We're mentioning all your former employers, but these are the numbers that are in the news, and we have Alberta's most prominent pollster right here in the Real Talk studio that you can help us understand these numbers. But fewer British Columbians say that the pipeline, this project should receive a fast track. So that, there's different scenarios here, right? If you're talking about someone that supports a pipeline, assuming that there's been Indigenous consultation opportunities for First Nations ownership or investment, obviously environmental, all of the protocol has been met, et cetera, et cetera. It's much different than a bunch of people saying, bring out the backhoes today and let's start tearing up the land and getting the pipeline in the ground. But it's interesting to see that, technically speaking, a majority of British Columbians would support a new pipeline. That's not what their premier's saying.
Well, and even more so than the raw numbers, I'm interested in the way the numbers are trending, the direction of those numbers. And you would not have got that a year ago. You wouldn't have got that 5 years ago. But as Duane said, with Donald Trump, with the war on trade internationally, Canadians are looking differently at their own economy, and even British Columbians are. And so, yes, I think there's public opinion is on the move, and it's really exciting to, as a pollster from a numbers point of view, it's really exciting to see these numbers change. It's hard for politicians to keep up. But as I said earlier, I sense that David Eby is sensing this sea change, that there's more openness to the development of natural resources. And he, as an NDP premier, has to decide what's the fine line that I need to walk if I'm going to get my party reelected.
Well, the other comment was, why is Carney supporting this pipeline? Why is he putting this money in? And there's no evidence he's putting money in. We'll have to wait till Thursday on that. Where are the projects for BC? Excuse me? Look at the two lists of projects and count how many are in BC. The expansion of the LNG terminal in Prince Rupert, some of the mine projects that are much further along, the expansion of transmission line capacity in northwestern British Columbia. So for Eby to say, well, where's our Christmas present? There's been a lot of stuff under the tree for Mr. Eby.
Also of interest here, Johnny's showing us this tweet from Jeff Rath.
We got to throw this in.
Jeff Rath.
Johnny, you know what's so funny? I sent this to you yesterday before he tweeted calling me a Russian bot. I should have mentioned that Jeff Rath officially referred to me as a Russian bot yesterday. I have to assume he was joking, but this is the guy that claims that he's been part of a delegation down meeting with senior Trump officials, etc. Certainly not the official leader of Alberta separatism, but probably its biggest cheerleader. Jeff Rath tweeting directly at Alberta's premier his cynicism. I don't think they like that she's doing a deal with the federal Liberals, but Jeff Rath says, listen, it's an MOU, Premier. It doesn't change any of the reasons or the math for Alberta independence. Your buddy Mark, look at this, Danielle Smith, she of the notwithstanding clause, she of the book ban, she of parents' rights is not conservative enough for this guy. Your buddy Mark, says Jeff, is still flooding Alberta with third world workers, read what you want into that, destroying our labor market, stealing our guns. He hasn't actually repealed any job-killing laws. Have any of the geniuses around this deal figured out the economic cost per barrel of decarbonizing the oil that's going to fill it? None of us are buying this liberal bullshit. That from Jeff Rath.
That actually helps Danielle Smith and Mark Carney.
Mm-hmm. Go into it.
Well, the fact that Jeff Rath is opposing it and in this hyperbolic, does he believe that an independent Alberta would make it easier to build a pipeline to the coast?
When the Prime Minister's already offering a pipeline.
Yes.
It's an insane take. It's if the blinders, horses have blinders that have them. These blinders are starting to trend inward and they're losing. These guys have 10% vision right now. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, say what you want about René Lévesque or Lucien Bouchard or Jacques Parizeau. Those were serious people with serious ideas. Jeff Rath is not a serious person.
Yeah, well, I think it just goes to show, the demand for independence. We've said this on the show before because it's obvious that a pipeline agreement or some sort of a pipeline collaboration, we'll call it an MOU for now, essentially deflates an Alberta independence movement entirely. What are you going to bang the drum on anymore?
Well, and you were asking earlier, where's the support going to lie for this? And I think Smith is going to get a lot of support in Alberta. I think Carney's going to get greater support in Alberta. You know who's not going to like this besides Jeff Rath? Pierre Poilievre.
Go on.
Because now he is stuck because he has been calling, Poilievre or Carney worse than Trudeau. This never would have happened under Justin Trudeau. I mean, Justin Trudeau took great risk with building the Trans Mountain Pipeline, got no upside. So no one even talks about Trudeau and Notley when it comes to Trans Mountain. What does Poilievre say? Does he make the same comment? It's just an MOU. It's just a piece of paper. Carney needs to get out of the way. Every time he says get out of the way, are you talking that we don't do Indigenous consultation, that we don't do impact environmental assessment, right? There's streamlining versus doing nothing. And so I think Poilievre is not going to be happy by this.
One other angle on this poll that I wanted to mention, a plurality of Canadians, 46%, a majority of British Columbians, just barely, 52%, who say that BC or any province on whose land a pipeline is built should have veto rights. And maybe Dr. Bratt will give us a constitutional lesson here. Veto rights unless conditions are met. 57% of Quebecers believe the same, that a province should have veto rights if a pipeline runs through its territory. The inverse carries in Alberta, and this is kind of funny. 58% in Alberta say the province should not be able to block a project. Similar numbers in Saskatchewan at 56%. Kind of interesting. Alberta wants everyone to leave them alone and believes that it should have veto rights. Maybe not on the record, but the spirit of it is there. Unless it's a pipeline in which they don't believe that a province should have veto rights. But
totally
generally
consistent.
speaking, I'll go on the record. I don't think, and I think the majority of Canadians, on the street might agree that I don't think that a province can have or should have veto rights on an interprovincial or national or international project where the federal government has jurisdiction. Nothing would work in Canada.
Well, the difference between those provinces is whether they're landlocked or not, right? The provinces that are not landlocked want to have a veto. They want to control their ports, and Alberta just doesn't have that option. So so of course Albertans feel differently about that. We need the acquiescence of other provinces to get our products to market. PEI doesn't need anybody's cooperation to get its seafood to market.
Yeah, I mean, the Constitution is very clear here. It doesn't mention pipelines. It talks about rail and other things that cross provincial boundaries, and successive courts, rightly so, have said a pipeline that crosses provincial boundaries is in national jurisdiction, which is why Trans Mountain was built despite the opposition of John Horgan. Now it gets more dicey because now we're talking about political reality. And will you go against the wishes of a big, powerful province like Quebec on something as important as this, as opposed to British Columbia?
I want to talk to the two of you about recall campaigns that are underway in the province of Alberta. You want to talk about democracy? That's democracy in action. And, the notwithstanding clause deserves our attention. And then, of course, musing from Alberta's premier and ministers about healthcare delivery in the province, I think demands our attention with these two. The sharpest knives in the drawer here today. Janet Brown. By the way, you can check out Janet's work at Janet Brown Opinion Research by visiting planetjanet.ca. Dr. Duane Bratt, our guest as well, and you can find both of them on X, the site formerly known as Twitter. We're really proud here at Real Talk to be working with the Royal Alexandra Hospital Foundation every Tuesday for the next number of months as the Royal Alexandra Hospital observes its 125th year. We're sharing echoes of the Alex. These are stories through a century and a quarter of the doctors, nurses, and support staff at the Royal Alexandra transforming, saving, changing lives forever. You know, some cycles are so painful, so entrenched that breaking out of them can feel impossible. Not just for the people that are living through them, but for the families who love them too. That was the reality for Nathan Stahaley. Nathan was adopted into a loving home, kind, affectionate, loved Harry Potter, fresh oranges, passionate snowboarder. But at 17, Nathan fell in with a group that changed the course of his life. It started with missing classes, staying out late, spiraling into decades of addiction, unstable housing, and a system that just couldn't catch him. A juvenile detention turned into jail, couch surfing into encampments. Every release put Nathan right back into the cycle he was trying to outrun. His parents, Marjorie and Glenn, were doing everything they could, bringing him meals, clothing, of course, love, second chances. But the support that Nathan needed was fragmented, inconsistent, felt out of reach. His parents were with him through the hardest years of his life, and then one day officers came to their door. And without a word spoken, Nathan's parents knew. Nathan was gone. 36 years old, a life full of potential, lost to a system never built to help him heal. But out of their heartbreak, Marjorie and Glenn made a choice to turn their grief into change. And when they learned about Bridge Healing, a program built to break the very cycle that consumed their son, something shifted. Bridge Healing offers short-term housing, wraparound support, community connection, and a real pathway out of crisis. They saw the hope that Nathan never had, and they committed to supporting the program to help others find the chance that their son missed. Nathan's parents say a system like Bridge Healing can be life-saving. It gives people hope. It gives them a chance. This is Echoes of the Alex. If you want to help change the story for somebody else trapped in the cycle of addiction and houselessness, visit givetoroyalalex.org. Together, we can offer the chance that Nathan never had, the chance to rebuild, heal, and start again. Again, that's givetoroyalalex.org. We encourage you to join us right here on Real Talk. Coming up this Friday, that's November 28th, for a special edition of the Real Talk Roundtable, where we'll learn more about Bridge Healing at the Royal Alexandra. Janet Brown and Dr. Duane Bratt, our guests in studio. It's kind of funny, we just roll back into political stories after hearing something like that. This is real life. All of this is live. The two of you are sitting there listening to me, and I know as two passionate Albertans yourself, it makes me think about things like healthcare supports and the healthcare system.
Well, and as a pollster, I know how closely connected people's personal experience is with their voting. And we talk about the inside baseball and this character and that character and strategic motivations. But sometimes I think it's lost in it that just the average voter is walking into the voting station thinking about their parent that's in a nursing home, thinking about their kid that's struggling, thinking about their kid that's in a class of 39. But that would change the subject.
Yeah, well, it's okay to change the subject. I mean, this is kind of how we swerve around in conversations. It's how real people talk.
Well, it's a major policy initiative of the Alberta government is dealing with addictions, the Alberta recovery model. And there's a lot of debate about that. I have personal experience in this. My daughter works at the drop-in center in Calgary. And so she's actually up for promotion. We'll see how that goes. But, the stories that she comes home at, are heartbreaking. And this is not the only one. Nathan's not the only one.
Yeah, that's for sure. It's you could talk about this government's approach to dealing with the opioid crisis, and we've gone at that in past. I blew off a little steam in a recent episode after a comment in our live chat kind of set me off, talking about how we value human lives and how we approach evidence-based treatment. We welcome feedback from Real Talkers to our email inbox as well, to talk@ryanjesperson.com. A nurses' strike narrowly averted, although we got a great message from a Real Talker who pointed out to me. She said, this is not a done deal, right? She said that this is an agreement basically in principle that kept 16,000 LPNs from striking, but you've got some unrest and some tension and some uncertainty on the healthcare front, to say the least. The AUPE bargainers were talking, publicly speaking. I heard Sandra Azikar, president, talking about the burnout and the toll that the short-staffed nature of the healthcare system is taking on workers and the like. Teachers ordered back to class about a month ago, but you look at what that did, not just for public sentiment around that, but also the relationship between teachers and the province, and prompted, I have to assume, in the case of the education minister, a recall petition. There are a whole bunch of them right now. Is this something that you forecasted or that you saw coming when Jason Kenney's government made it possible and introduced this recall legislation?
Not to this degree. To have, at this count, on Tuesday morning, 9 recall petitions, I thought that was astounding. And it's obviously coordinated, but it illustrates a degree of anger of what is going on. Now, you talked about recall being democratic. Well, it depends. There is a group that really believes in what they call direct democracy, that want the idea of recall, that you don't just wait between elections. Citizens initiative referendums, more referendums, plebiscites, petitions, that's all part of direct democracy. I am not a fan of direct democracy. I think it takes really complex public policy and makes it really, really simple into yes and no questions. I'm a much better believer in representative democracy. So it's a type of democracy. It's not better. I think it's worse. But I would just classify it as a different form of democracy. And we've had recall in North America for over 100 years. We've got lots of experience. And so this could have been predicted. For Nicolaitis and Smith to say, well, it is being weaponized. Well, they're right, it is being weaponized. But this wasn't the point. The point was, if it was, criminal charges but not a conviction, or someone not showing up to work, or huge ethical breaches. I think that's the point of recall. But that's not what the government did. And that's not the messaging of the government, including back the Wild Rose days of Danielle Smith saying, well, no, it's about holding our MLAs to account. Well, that's exactly what is going on here, except they don't like it because they're the ones being held account. And I expect that you're going to see a backlash, not to the idea of recall, although that's possible. I'm wondering when the mobilization is against NDP MLAs, sort of a tit for tat. And that, I think, will show some of the problems with the legislation if you're doing that.
I'll reference reporting here by this is Sean Boynton with Global News, who's put this together as Elections Alberta the day before we're talking to Dr. Duane Bratt and, of course, Janet Brown in our feature interview presented by Mercedes-Benz Edmonton West, approving Elections Alberta did recall petitions for 6 more UCP caucus members, as Duane said, bringing that total number to 9, including members of Smith's cabinet, the Speaker of the Alberta Legislature. Alberta and BC, the only 2 provinces in the country with recall legislation. It's not easy, right? Jason Kenney, when he passed the Recall Act coming up on 5 years ago, Duane, 4 and a bit years ago. Under the original law, petitioners would have needed to collect signatures from at least 40% of eligible voters in a riding within 2 months, we'll say 60 days after that recall effort approved by Elections Alberta. Kenney said at that point it would strengthen their commitment to democracy and accountability. Earlier this year, Smith's government passing amendments to the Recall Act that lowered some of those thresholds, including extending the deadline to 90 days. So you got 3 months to do it. Petitioners must now collect signatures from electors equal to at least 60% of people who voted in the most recent provincial election in a riding in order to be successful. But then, if enough signatures are verified, a recall vote held within 4 months, and that must garner at least 50% support for the MLA to be officially removed from office. So it's not an easy process. You have to have in my mind, almost an egregious situation to convince that many people.
But you're assuming that that's the goal. You can win without getting those signatures. You can win without getting a recall election. And the example I will cite is Jyoti Gondek in Calgary. There was a recall effort made against her a year before the election. They never got the signatures. They never came close to the signatures, but the process, I think, greatly weakened Jyoti Gondek. And the person who launched the petition, a guy by the name of Landon Johnson, developed name recognition, developed a volunteer base, and is now a city councillor in Calgary. So is this about, overturning the UCP? I don't think they're going to come close to doing that. Is it about weakening the UCP? Absolutely.
Al's watching us, and then I'll hand the conch over to you, Janet. Al's watching us on Facebook this morning, says mobilization against NDP members will not be a problem. Members in those constituencies are pretty safe. I don't know. I mean, I guess you could probably say the same thing about some of the Conservatives that are being targeted, though.
Well, to Duane's point, though, yes, they're probably pretty safe in the fact that enough signatures will not be collected. But they will be distracted by this. This will be a big distraction, just like it was for Jyoti Gondek. And you have to think about the motivations of the people who are doing them. But the whole thing kind of does make me laugh, because when it was the idea of recall was initially presented, it was going to be good for democracy. That's how we started this conversation off. It was going to be good for democracy. And I didn't hear any UCP MLAs getting upset about how the law was being used against Jyoti Gondek.
Nope.
To my knowledge, she's done nothing
They actually
criminal.
made it easier to do.
To my
after
knowledge,
her.
Gondek had done nothing criminal. I don't think she was missing days of work. I don't think she but they sort of, well, they were either gleeful about the efforts, or they sat on their hands and said nothing. So it's kind of hard to get upset about the fact that this law that they put in place is being used against them. But yes, I think it's, I didn't anticipate this was going to happen, but it was within the realm of the possible when they established the legislation. Yep. And then you have to look at Thomas Lukasik. And I know we're talking about recall. We're not talking about plebiscites, but they're similar, because nobody thought he would be able to accomplish what he accomplished, let alone blow past the goal. Now, those signatures haven't been verified. We don't know what's happening there. But he was able to put a coordinated effort together in a way that I don't think anybody anticipated. And now that's emboldened people to try and at least try and get people recalled. If not recalled, try and cause a lot of inconvenience.
And on the initiative, citizens initiative referendums, now you've got people using it to ban public funding of independent schools. Now you've got a proposal to end coal mining on the eastern slopes.
Corby Land.
So it's happening. And I am sure that when the government made it easier, she was looking at, the separatists and making it easier for them, not coal mining. We like coal mining, or not funding private schools. We like private schools. What do you mean you're doing that for this?
It sounds like a problem of getting too caught up in your own ideology and
everybody agrees with you.
And that they lack the imagination to think about, like in communications, you put out a statement and then you go through a little exercise where you try and imagine how someone's going to respond to it. You try and bulletproof it. And so it sort of shows that they were really deep in their ideological thinking, that it never occurred to them how the other side might want to weaponize this.
But Janet, can people become exhausted by this type of thing? Like, is there, like, I don't know what you want to call it, but like an engagement exhaustion or an empathy exhaustion where, and I mean, no offense to any of this, but the Forever Canadian petition, and then the Keep the Coal Out of the Eastern Slopes petition, and then the recall petition, and then the defund private schools petition, and like at some point, do people kind of go, eh?
People get exhausted by general elections. I mean, I think one of the reasons that the turnout was so low in the municipal election, because we also had a federal election in this year. And voters can definitely get burned out. And, they talk about direct democracy as being such a great thing, but, people get overwhelmed. And again, I'm always thinking about the average person and what's going through their mind when they're answering a poll and what's going through their mind when they're in a voting booth. And, and life is complicated, and it's hard for people to catch up on all of this stuff. And one of the things we heard in the municipal election was that people were very late to that game. Like, a lot of people didn't vote, but even the people who voted were very late to get their minds wrapped around those municipal issues. because there's just so much going on in the world right now. It's hard to keep track of all of this stuff, right? With Donald Trump, with what happened at the federal election. It's so many people would come up to me in the last week of the election going like, what do I do? How do I vote? I have not been paying attention.
Yeah, sure. In our live chat powered by Park Power, Goramut says, great guest today. Thank you, Real Talk. Says direct democracy is messy. It needs better framework than the UCP has. They thought they could use it against their enemies, and they never thought that it could cut both ways. Alberta Girl says, my MLA is the asshat that compared trans youth to castrated cattle. I wish we could recall him, since he can't stop putting his foot in his mouth, but the majority of voters in our riding, says Alberta Girl, cheers his ignorance. We've got another interesting point here from Gilles, Duane, that says if UCP MLAs can get voting records so they can get the support of previous voters, can recall petitioners access those same lists to contact others as well? People know about resources.
The Elections Alberta legislation says, those lists need to be destroyed, but photocopiers do exist. So, there are questions about how transparent that process is, and is it simply data mining?
Can you clarify for us what a government is compelled to do, if anything, if petitioners collect enough signatures to it doesn't
you're talking about the initiative referendum.
Say for example, someone can get 1 million signatures on a petition to defund independent or private schools. Yeah. What is the government compelled to do with that?
It depends on whether it's under the old legislation that Thomas Lukaszuk went or the new one. So the funding of schools is under the new one. That would require a referendum. Under Lukaszuk, it could go to the legislature, and the legislature would then have to either have a free vote on that topic or have a referendum. Under the new legislation, it would automatically go to a referendum. And this is a good illustration of some of the complexity. There's a lot of nuance between the funding of independent schools. So people will jump, well, it's the Weber Academy, it's Strathcona Tweedsmuir that's charging $30,000. It's also very small religious schools, back to basic schools. And so are taxpayers subsidizing them at 70% per student, or are the schools providing a subsidy because they're only getting 70%? Right? So there's a lot of nuance in this, which is why a simple yes or no question doesn't, in my mind, work. And I would rather have a much more sophisticated conversation, because most voters aren't going to do that work. They're just going to reflexively do something.
And sometimes just even having the dialogue can be very destructive. Now, I don't want to sound like I'm being anti-democratic, but sometimes just having the dialogue can be disruptive. And that's why Thomas Lukaszuk is saying, let's just have a vote in the legislature. Because I think what Thomas Lukaszuk is saying is, even the talk about separation is hurting our economy. It's hurting it's hurting dialogue within the province. We talked about this last night at the tourism event. That all of this talk of separation, what is it doing to Alberta's sense of openness and other Canadians' willingness to come here? So a lot of people would just like to stop the talk about separation because they think the talk is bad for Alberta.
Do you think that the talk about separation in a good way added pressure to the PMO and helped get an MOU done on a new pipeline? Do you think it factored in?
Absolutely, I think it factored in. I think that was part of it. And I think Smith deliberately used that strategy. Right? That if you're not going to work with me, Prime Minister, we've got these people over here and they're nuts, right? And they're going to want to separate.
But are the people who are nuts, did they make a direct impact on the Prime Minister of Canada's decision?
So let's assume, Janet's done the numbers on this, that it's 20 to 22%. And with another 10% that may be willing. That's still an awful lot of people that are unhappy. And so if you had a vote and it went 65-35, that still means there's 1.5 million Albertans that are so unhappy that they want to leave.
Can we get into these numbers? Because
sure.
If I own a restaurant and 1 in 5 people want to leave that restaurant, if I'm in charge of anything and 1 of 5 people are so dissatisfied they want to leave forever, we got a real problem on our hands. I do want to put this in front of real talkers that may not have seen this. I'm showing it on my screen right now. If you want to hear more from the public, or rather the private and independent, the charter school perspective, Duane was just making the point that it's not all $30,000 a year highbrow uniform wearing elite schools. John Jagersma, who's top of the chain right there. It's called AISCA. It's like the Association of Independent Schools and Colleges in Alberta. Joined us. That's October 22nd. That episode got a lot of play. A lot of people were really interested in the perspective that he put in front of this audience. Obviously, not everybody agrees. That's never the criteria for an interview on this show, but that was October 22nd. If you want to check that out on our YouTube channel or wherever you get your podcasts. More from Dr. Duane Bratt, Janet Brown in just a second. This episode is happening with the support of our incredible friends at Friesen Brothers, 16 locations across the province. By the way, you two, I'm working on getting something done for you. I'm trying to broker a deal here to get a Friesen Brothers down in Calgary, because we're always hearing from real talkers in Calgary when they're at any of those 16 locations, including 2 in Alberta's capital. Knocks their socks off. I read you an email just last week from someone. She discovered the Friesen Brothers sourdough cinnamon buns for the very first time. Said it blew her mind. You can learn more about what Friesen Brothers is doing all through their 70th anniversary this year. 2025, a big year. And they've always got something to celebrate. Keep in mind, coming up December 1st, the first of every month, your next chance to save 15% on grocery purchases of $75 or more only at Friesen Brothers, Alberta grown and Alberta owned. You know who else is Alberta grown, Alberta owned? We'll apologize to Friesen Brothers for stealing their slogan, but it fits California Closets too. This is a family-owned, Canadian-owned and operated business that manufactures everything it installs. These beautiful custom closets and storage solutions are right here in Alberta, using materials sourced as close to Alberta as possible. Every single installation guaranteed for life. The California Closets journey starts with a free design consultation where you'll meet with their team and quickly realize, like my wife and I did 8 years ago, they can work with any space and any budget. You don't have to be loaded to hire California Closets. I will tell you this, though, it'll change the game. You can request that free consultation today at californiaclosets.ca. Hey, it's giving season, and I know for a lot of you, you're going to be looking at your holiday giving. We're going to be talking about some Giving Tuesday initiatives and that sort of a thing. The team at North Road Investment Council, coming up in our next episode, that's going to be Wednesday's episode, is going to be talking to us, a conversation on money, giving, and taxes. North Road Investment Council is a steady hand and a studied voice to guide you through wealth and investing. And that includes, of course, successful saving. Their financial advisors led by Marshall McAllister. That's who's going to be joining us in this next episode. Would love to talk to you. Learn more about what makes them different at northroadic.com. And a quick note that Albertans are winning every single day on Play Alberta. PlayAlberta.ca is where you can find the team there. You can also find, of course, the Play Alberta app, and exclusively for Real Talkers, with casino winners every single hour, you can score a $50 casino bonus when you make a $50 deposit at playalberta.ca or on the Play Alberta app using the code Ryan50. That's all one word, Ryan50, for a $50 casino bonus when you make a minimum $50 deposit with Play Alberta. You must be 18 or over to play, and if you do gamble, please use your game sense. Don't forget, the next edition of Alberta Wins. These are big success stories, praise reports, as my buddy Laws calls them, every Thursday right here on Real Talk, presented by our friends at Play Alberta. Pollster and political commentator Janet Brown, political scientist Dr. Duane Bratt out of Mount Royal University, our guests here in the Real Talk studio. Take us into these numbers on what you've gleaned about how Albertans feel about leaving Canada for good.
Okay, so let me go back to a really extensive poll I conducted for CBC Calgary earlier in the year. We asked people, if a referendum were held today on separation, would you vote yes or no? And 28% of people said they would vote to separate. Comparing that to previous surveys over the last 5 or 6 years, that number really hasn't budged. So it may feel that separatist sentiment is growing, but that's not what our data shows. Our data shows it's intensifying, it's getting louder, but it's not growing. Now, when you look at that 28% and you look a little more closely at it and you look at so we asked a whole bunch of questions on separation, not just a referendum. We asked people, do you think it'd be easier to sell resources if we separated? Questions like that. You've got a group of people, I'm going to say about 22% of the populations, that's really hardcore. We call them committed separatists. Doesn't matter what you throw at them, they're just so disgusted they want to go. And then you've got another group that's softer separatists or more performative separatists, that they say, I'm going to say yes to a pollster about a referendum because I want to send a message to Ottawa. I want to get Ottawa to the table. And that's what Danielle Smith has been playing on, is those sort of softer separatists, those people that would be coming to the table. So the other big thing that came out of that CBC survey was so many of the questions we asked, the results ended up being a third. Didn't matter what question you threw at people, a third of people were always going to give you the crazy right-wing answer. Didn't matter what question, a third of you were always going to give the crazy left-wing answer. And then there's a third of the population who sort of sees it both ways. And when it comes to separatism, yeah, you've got, 22 to 28%, depending on who you look at it, who want to go. You've got another third of the population who is so disgusted we're even talking about it. And then you've got a third in the middle who are saying, I don't want to separate, but I definitely want a new deal with Ottawa. And that's what this memo of understanding is all about. It's about, 68% of Albertans voted for the Conservative Party in the federal election. A half of that, 68%, almost half of them would vote to go in a referendum. The other half who voted Conservative federally, they don't necessarily want to separate, but they weren't happy with the status quo either. And this is what the memo of understanding is all about, is people who want Canada to work, Albertans who want Canada to work, but don't think it's working yet.
Into our live chat, powered by Park Power, Cassandra, thanks for your YouTube channel membership. Cassandra says the Nicolaitis petition, the education minister petition, was because of how he treated us. She says his constituents, sounds like she might live in that riding, says there's a lot of organizing went into it before launch, and he also won by a narrow margin. She says, so that's why he was first. On education funding, whole can of worms there. Meta Modern says if public dollars are used to fund an institution to which the public doesn't have access by default, that's a big problem. Meantime, we have Lightning Rod, who says the separatist movement absolutely is hurting our economy. It's hard to imagine that it wouldn't. I guess, to state the obvious, international investors in particular, we haven't even talked about recruiting or retaining talented expert staff, researchers, keeping post-secondary students either here in the universities or keeping them here to live, work, and raise their families after they graduate. I mean, I think that the spillover impact of it all, people want certainty in their lives.
Absolutely. And would you invest large sums of money? Would you make a plan to move if that place was then going to leave from the place that you thought you were moving to?
I've kept the two of you into overtime, so we'll make this the final story we'll touch on. See, this is why you guys might need your own podcast. We can produce it for you.
You got a nice studio.
We both have full-time jobs, and this is why we probably don't need our own podcast.
If you're just joining us, Janet Brown, Dr. Duane Bratt, our guests in just a fantastic episode, and I want to wrap with the healthcare story out of Alberta right now. Kind of what do we want to call it? It's a dual model, is what they're saying. It's kind of a public-private hybrid, where I think that the GOA is trying to find a way to address some really immediate crises within the healthcare system, and there may be other motivations as well, perhaps including entrepreneurial opportunity. But this has long been mused about in Alberta in particular. Now, Friends of Medicare, other groups have pushed back, suggesting that the Alberta government, the measures in this bill, this is Bill 11, the Health Statutes Amendment Act, may contravene the Canada Health Act, and it has prompted the government to pull family doctors out of the conversation for now. So access to sort of a dual model or public-private hybrid will not be available, at least right now, to family doctors. This also keeps emergency medicine and surgeries for life-threatening conditions, including cancer, entirely within the public system. So concerns around, for example, fast-tracking cancer surgeries for people with means may be on the back burner for now. Where's your head at with this, Duane?
So people talk like the Canada Health Act is the be-all and end-all. It's a 40-year piece of legislation. Maybe it is time to look at the Canada Health Act and see how it could be reformed, improved. The other is that we had public health care for years before the Canada Health Act. It just codified it. So it's not like we're talking about the Constitution here. We're talking about a piece of legislation that perhaps needs to be looked at. There is problems with the Alberta healthcare system. There's no doubt about that.
Isn't it amazing when an ambulance goes by?
Yeah. But is this the right answer? And I will defer to Janet because this is deja vu all over again. But you may recall during the election campaign, On day one, there is Danielle Smith signing this public health guarantee. And then what do we see post-election? We see, we're going to have private surgical facilities. We're going to have private addiction clinics. Those are going to be publicly funded. We're going to have private lab services. Now we're going to have doctors who could opt in and opt out simultaneously of the public system. That is moving in a lot of different directions towards more private health care, not the public health guarantee. But Janet, why don't you talk about your experiences?
It's absolutely deja vu. So I'm going to give my age away here, but I can remember
39 forever.
39 forever, but 25 or 30 years ago, I hope the statute of limitations is gone on this one, that working for this client. But 25 or 30 years ago, I remember doing focus groups when Gary Marr was Minister of Health, and back then it was called the third way. One way was the Canadian way. One way was the American way. Let's find a third way somewhere in the middle. And back then we were looking at the public appetite for more private delivery and private pay. And these discussions can get complicated because, the unions will talk about no privatization at all. But in the public's mind, there's two things. There's who delivers the services and who pays for the services. And the average person cares far less about who delivers it than who pays for it. And so this is why this whole debate is going to get contentious and complicated, because the public is going to want to know, hey, I'll go to a clinic to get my cataracts done, particularly if there's free parking and it's easy, but do I have to pay for it? And how much do I have to pay for it? And why should I have to pay for it and somebody else doesn't have to pay for it?
So is it, when we look at things, so it's also intensely personal, and this is the way with a lot of people's politics, like this is kind of been a running theme even through this episode, is that when something impacts you personally or hits hard in your region or your family unit or what have you, your school maybe, it will impact how you feel about the politics around it, right? Like if your kindergarten kid has 39 students in the class, or if your daughter is trans, or if your whole family has worked in coal for 4 generations or what have you, if your parent is waiting 18 months for hip surgery, or you get the point, right? It's polling and politics is very personal.
I was saying to a client the other day, when we do polls aren't designed to find out what people think. They're designed to find out what people feel. And if you want to change people's minds, don't focus on their thinking, focus on their feelings, because we as human beings, we like to think of ourselves as a rational species. We like to think of ourselves as somebody who makes rational decisions. But what human beings are good at is having emotional reactions to things and then rationalizing their emotions. And to just think that people day in and day out are just completely looking at situations dispassionately and rationally, it's just a complete lack of understanding of human nature and politics. I like this as well. Super Chat Ken. By the way, Super Chat Ken, thank you for your $5 contribution earlier. This is, people can make donations to the show here, and what we tell our guests is this is the audience's way of buying you a cold beer. And so Ken has bought the two of you cold beer. He says, I got to stop having such great guests on the show. He says it's blowing his budget away. A beer or one of those mint chocolate
things?
No,
the mint chocolate is right here, my friend.
So the steely-eyed YouTube viewers will see that the seal on that has been cracked.
Well, hey, if I'm going to be a credible commentator on the quality of a cream liqueur, I must taste it myself, Janet.
Okay.
So there you go. But I wanted to thank Super Chat Ken for that. But he did also offer up a comment here, which I've now lost because this thing is just zooming. I mean, the chat is very engaged today. But then let me say the spirit of his comment. Ken, I apologize, I lost it. But the spirit of the comment was basically, he said, I'm not like 100% or entirely against, maybe like different. I want to be careful how I phrase it. He said sort of different methods or different approaches to healthcare delivery. He said, but I think that there's just basically kind of like a credibility issue around this government where he says that, people sort of recognize or suspect. Here's Ken's comment. I have no problem with private delivery of public health. The problem here is that the UCP can't seem to be transparent about any process. He says the grift is always part of it with this group.
And I think that's a problem this government is facing on that point. Which is why I began with the public health guarantee and then a very quick movement. There's already lots of private delivery of healthcare. Dentists, optometrists. Do we need Could we have private delivery of food services in a hospital and laundry services in a hospital? So there's lots of different models. So it's a very complex situation. And there's an intuitive thing that, well, if you've got surgical facilities and one person goes over to the private, that's going to create space on the public. So why wouldn't you be opposed to that? Well, the doctor who is now delivering the private surgery is not on the public list. And he's also taking an anesthetist and a bed and a surgical group with him, right? So it's not as intuitive as people think. But options can be looked at, but the problem is the government does have a credibility issue on this because of the statements that Smith made during the 2023 campaign. And we do know that DynaLife was a disaster. The surgical facilities was a disaster. We're still waiting to see how big a disaster. So they've tried to do this before. Now they're going to do it with doctors?
We shall see, my friends, and that's the beauty of it. We shall see. I want to thank both of you for making time before departing back to my hometown, my beloved hometown of Calgary, to hang out with us here in studio. We've been wanting to make this happen for quite some time, and the insights you've brought to the table are earning great compliments and praise from people across the political spectrum in our chat. And I always look at that as a harbinger of a really good show, as an indicator. Let me
there
say.
We go.
Harbinger, I'll take that word back. An indicator, proof of a great episode. That's Dr. Duane Bratt from Mount Royal University, political scientist there, and of course Janet Brown at Janet Brown Opinion Research. You can learn more about what Janet does. Accurate data, the cornerstone of effective decision making, and Janet. I mean, gosh, I'm trying to think of a time that you've really blown it, Janet. I can't think of one. As a matter of fact, you've kind of built a brand where when you put numbers out there, people take them as God speak. That's going to be a good position to be in.
It's nerve-wracking, but it's got to be accurate. I don't know why you'd be in the business if you weren't committed to accuracy.
You have set the bar high and consistently delivered. But before the two of you leave, and Real Talkers, before we wrap, I wanted to show you this photo. Check this out. We celebrated Real Talk's 5th birthday over the weekend, and the team at Acapella Catering was there with us. This is, I don't mean to rub this in your faces as all of our stomachs are grumbling here, working on just coffee, but they showed up with a turkey dinner poutine. Supriya Devetti taught me how to properly. She said my poutine is too Western. It's poutine. But the team at Acapella Catering absolutely nailed it. And I wanted to make sure they're on the radar of Real Talkers. If you check out acapellacatering.com, they've got these ready bake options coming into the holiday season. You can view their menus again at acapellacatering.com, at your service with pleasure, through owner-operated service, and it really does show. They provide scratch-made food created from local and farm-fresh ingredients. They're providing service excellence to Edmonton area for more than 30 years, if you can believe it. You can request a quote today, get a custom menu. That's what we did by visiting acapellacatering.com. And for those of you that are going to be looking to either gift yourself with something special or maybe a man in your life with something special, thehelmclothing.com has its 2025 gift guide out. They've carefully selected their top winner picks to suit every personality and style. Straight up, The Helm is where I go when I've got a big event, public or private, that I need to look my best. I walk in there and I essentially have the team take over for me. They know what looks best together. They know what's fashion forward. They know what's going to last. The best value on custom and luxury casual wear for men is at thehelmclothing.com. And if you're shopping there today for yourself or someone you love, remember the promo code REALTALK. All one word will save 10% on your online order. That's REALTALK, all one word, to knock 10% off your purchase today at thehelmclothing.com. We want to thank Duane Bratt and Janet Brown for joining us in this episode of the show. Of course, these conversations will continue as we learn more about this MOU on Thursday between Alberta and Ottawa, Alberta and the feds. In the meantime, we want to hear from you to talk at ryanjesperson.com. Your thoughts on what we've been talking about on the show, or maybe what you've not heard us talking about. We always want to make sure that we're representing the issues and diving deep with integrity and curiosity into what matters most to you. That's what Real Talk is all about. Thanks for liking this episode. Thanks for telling your friends about it. And we'll see you again in 22 hours right here on Real Talk.
Real Talk is hosted by Ryan Jesperson, executive producer Josh Dunford, technical producer John Hicks, general manager Katie Cook-Chivers, account coordinator Lawrence Derlego, human resources Lena Shepard, website design Mike Johnston, voiceover by me, Carrie Skelton, member emerita Julie Rohr. Real Talk is recorded in Edmonton, Alberta on Treaty 6 territory, the traditional and ancestral territory of the Cree, Dene, Blackfoot, Saulteaux, and Nakota Sioux, home to the Métis settlements and the Métis Nation of Alberta. Real Talk is a relay project. For more, check out ryanjesperson.com.